Hey everyone, and welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to be taking a closer look at Checkpoint Therapeutics,
Okay.
or CKPT, as is known by those in the know,
Why the ticker?
on the stock market.
Exactly.
And they've been kind of making some waves lately in the biotech world.
Yeah, they're a very interesting company.
And they've had some, big news recently, including an FDA approval,
Right.
which has got everybody buzzing about their potential.
Like huge potential.
And as we all know, big news can mean big swings in the stock market.
Absolutely.
So we're going to kind of break down what's been going on and what it means for you.
Yeah, what's so captivating about Checkpoint Therapeutics is that they are a prime example of what many consider a high-risk, high-reward investment.
Right.
I mean, they are really on the verge of breaking into a massive market,
Oh, yeah.
but they're still working through some of that volatility.
Yeah.
That's typical of the biotech industry. So for anyone watching CKPT, understanding those nuances is really crucial.
Okay, well, let's dive into those nuances then
Sure.
for our listeners.
Okay.
So right now, CKPT is trading at around 3.66 a share
As of December 13th.
as of December 13th.
Yeah.
But what's got everyone talking are the analyst predictions,
Yeah.
saying that it could hit $20 within the year. It's a pretty significant jump.
Huge jump. Yeah. And it makes you wonder why they're so bullish, right?
Yeah.
Why are they so optimistic?
Exactly.
Well, there are a few factors at play here.
Okay.
And one really interesting trend we've observed is that smaller companies,
Right.
sometimes known as small cap stocks,
Okay.
have been outperforming the larger companies since the recent U.S. presidential election.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and CKPT, with a market capitalization of $176.65 million,
Right.
falls squarely into that small cap category.
Okay, so can you break down market capitalization
Sure.
for our listeners?
Absolutely.
What does that actually mean?
So market capitalization, or market cap, is simply the total value of all of a company's outstanding shares.
Yeah.
It's a way to gauge the overall size of a company in the market.
Gotcha.
And smaller companies like CKPT sometimes see their stock prices rise more dramatically than larger, more established companies,
Right.
especially in times of economic optimism.
Okay.
And that seems to be a driving force in the market right now.
So this post-election surge could be playing a role in CKPT's projected growth.
It very well could be.
Interesting.
But there's another major piece of news
Okay.
driving investor excitement,
Right.
and that is the FDA approval of their drug, UNLOXCYT,
Right.
for treating advanced cutaneous squamous cell carcinoma,
Okay.
a type of skin cancer.
Type of skin cancer.
Yeah, and this is a huge milestone because
Yeah.
it moves Checkpoint Therapeutics from a development stage company to a commercial stage company
Right.
with a product ready to hit the market.
That makes sense. An FDA approval means they can actually start generating revenue from this drug.
Yes.
Right. And we're talking about a market potentially worth over $1 billion annually.
Yes.
That's got to get investors' attention.
That's a big deal for sure.
Yeah.
$1 billion market potential is a huge part of why analysts are so optimistic about CKPT's future.
Yeah.
However, it's important to remember that potential doesn't always translate directly to profit.
Of course.
There are still hurdles to overcome, competitors to contend with, and of course the general ups and downs in the market.
Right. It's not a guaranteed win just because they have FDA approval.
Right.
So let's talk about some of those potential hurdles.
Okay.
Their Q3 2024 earnings report showed a net loss of $9.7 million.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound great, does it?
Losses are always something to be aware of,
Right.
especially in the biotech industry, where bringing a drug to market is incredibly expensive.
All right.
But in this case, CKPT was able to raise $9.2 million through warrant exercises,
Okay.
which helped to offset some of that loss.
Hold on. Can you explain warrant exercises
Yeah.
to our listeners who might not be familiar with that term?
Yeah.
It sounds a little complicated.
In simple terms, warrants give investors the right, but not the obligation, to buy more stock at a set price in the future.
Okay.
So when these warrants are exercised, it means investors are choosing to buy those shares,
Right.
injecting cash into the company.
Interesting.
And in this case, that cash infusion gives CKPT a bit more breathing room to continue operations.
Yeah.
Which is crucial for companies still in its early commercial stage.
Yeah. It gives them a longer runway to get UNLOXCYT established in the market.
Right.
And hopefully start generating significant revenue.
Okay, that makes sense. But it sounds like they're still spending a lot of money, especially on research and development.
Yeah.
Their R&D expenses went up to $6.4 million in Q3. So how do we interpret that?
Well,
Is that a good or bad thing?
it's actually a really interesting point.
Okay.
Increased R&D spending
Right.
could be seen as a positive indicator.
It suggests that Checkpoint Therapeutics is committed to innovation and continuing to develop new treatments,
Right.
which is vital for long-term growth in the biotech industry.
So they're essentially investing in their future,
Exactly.
even while they're working to make UNLOXCYT a success in the market.
Precisely. And that's a balancing act.
Yeah.
Many biotech companies have to manage
Right.
focusing on the present
Uh-huh.
while also keeping an eye on the future.
Okay.
That's one of the things that makes this industry so dynamic.
It definitely sounds like it. Now, there's another important date coming up for CKPT.
Okay.
December 28th, 2024.
Right.
This is their PDUFA date.
Yes,
And I know a lot of listeners might be wondering what that means.
of course.
Can you break it down for us?
PDUFA stands for Prescription Drug User Fee Act.
Okay.
Essentially, it's the deadline by which the FDA has to make a decision
Gotcha.
on a new drug application.
So in this case, the FDA is reviewing another one of Checkpoint Therapeutics drugs.
Yes, they're a drug called cosabelimab.
Okay.
December 28th is the day we'll find out whether or not it gets approved.
Gotcha.
And these PDUFA dates can often create a lot of volatility in a company's stock price.
Why is that what makes these dates so important for investors?
Because the FDA's decision, whether it's an approval or a rejection,
Right.
has a huge impact on the company's future prospects.
Makes sense.
If cosabelimab is approved,
Yeah.
it could open up another significant revenue stream for Checkpoint Therapeutics
Oh, wow.
and send the stock price soaring. But if it's rejected, well, that could have the opposite effect.
So a lot is riding on this December 28th date.
Potentially, yes.
It sounds like it's going to be a nail-biter for anyone invested in CKPT.
It could be. And it highlights the importance of understanding the specific catalysts and events
Yeah,
that can drive stock price movements,
of course.
especially in a volatile sector like biotech.
Right. Speaking of things that can move stock prices,
Yeah.
let's talk about some of those key financial metrics that investors always pay close attention to,
Sure.
starting with EPS, or earnings per share. CKPT's current EPS is negative 0.23.
As of the last earnings report.
Can you explain what that means and why it matters?
Absolutely. EPS is a measure of a company's profitability.
Okay.
It tells you how much profit a company is making
Right.
for each outstanding share of stock.
Gotcha.
Now, a negative EPS, like we're seeing with CKPT,
Yeah.
means the company is currently losing money. This isn't necessarily unusual for a company in a growth phase,
Right.
particularly in biotech where upfront development costs are so high.
So even though a negative EPS might sound alarming, it's not always a cause for panic,
It is not.
especially for a company like CKPT that's still in its early stages of commercialization.
Exactly. Investors often look at the trend of EPS rather than a single snapshot in time.
Okay.
Is the EPS improving? Are they moving towards profitability? Those are the questions they're asking.
And along with EPS, we also hear a lot about profit margins, both gross and net.
Right.
Can you explain those for our listeners and tell us why they're important?
Sure. Profit margins essentially tell you how efficiently a company is turning revenue into profit.
Good.
A high profit margin indicates they're keeping a larger portion of their sales as profit.
Right.
For a company like CKPT, which is just starting to generate revenue from UNLOXCYT,
Yeah.
profit margins might be negative or very low initially.
Okay.
But as they scale up production and sales, you'd want to see those margins start to improve.
So it's about watching for that upward trend, even if the numbers aren't ideal right now.
Precisely. It's all about understanding where a company is in its life cycle
Yeah.
and what metrics are most relevant to evaluate its progress.
Now let's switch gears a bit and talk about what this all means for potential investors.
Sure.
Let's say someone is listening to this episode. They're really intrigued by Checkpoint Therapeutics
Okay.
and thinking, hey, maybe I should invest in this company. What advice would you give them?
That's a great question. The first piece of advice I always give is to do your own thorough research.
Oh, of course.
Don't just rely on what you hear on a podcast, even one as excellent as Investing Talk podcasts.
That's very true. We're just giving you a starting point here.
Exactly. Dig deeper into the company's financials. Read analyst reports. Understand the science behind their drugs. And really consider whether it aligns with your own investment goals and risk tolerance.
That's sound advice. But for someone who's done their research and is ready to jump in, what are some strategies they might consider with a stock like CKPT?
Well, one approach is buying on dips. This means watching the stock closely and buying shares when the price drops,
Okay.
potentially taking advantage of short-term volatility.
So it's kind of like waiting for a sale at your favorite store.
Yeah.
You get a better price if you're patient and strategic.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Of course, this strategy requires close monitoring of the stock and the ability to react quickly to price fluctuations.
Right.
Another option is a long-term hold strategy,
Okay.
which is based on the belief that the company will continue to grow and generate strong returns over time.
So a long-term hold is more about the big picture, riding out the inevitable ups and downs of the market and trusting in the company's long-term potential.
Exactly. And with CKPT,
Yeah.
analysts have given it a strong buy rating,
Wow.
which indicates confidence in its long-term prospects. But regardless of your chosen strategy,
Right.
staying informed and keeping an eye on those key financial metrics, especially the upcoming earnings reports, is absolutely essential.
It sounds like with CKPT, there's a lot to be excited about, but also a lot to pay attention to.
Yeah, it's a company with a lot of potential, but also some risks to be aware of.
This PDUFA in particular feels like a major turning point for the company.
It definitely is. December 28th could be a game changer for Checkpoint Therapeutics.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. FDA approvals, financial reports, potential investment strategies. It's a lot to digest. I think this conversation has given our listeners a much better understanding of Checkpoint Therapeutics, its potential, and the factors that could impact its future.
I hope so. And I think the key takeaway here is that while Checkpoint Therapeutics presents a really exciting opportunity, particularly with that recent FDA approval of UNLOXCYT, it's crucial to approach any investment decision with careful consideration and a well-informed perspective.
Couldn't agree more. So to kind of wrap things up,
Okay.
let's put ourselves in the shoes of our listeners.
Okay.
If you were considering investing in Checkpoint Therapeutics right now, what would be your top 3 things to keep in mind?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
First, I would say closely monitor the upcoming PDUFA date for cosabelimab on December 28th.
Okay.
The FDA's decision is going to have a significant impact on the company's trajectory.
That makes sense. It's a big catalyst on the horizon. What's number 2?
I would say keep a close eye on their earnings reports, especially how their revenue from UNLOXCYT is growing.
Right.
And whether their profit margins are improving over time.
Okay.
That'll give you a sense of how well they're executing their commercial strategy.
Solid advice. And finally, number 3.
I'd say consider your own investment goals and risk tolerance.
Okay.
CKPT is still a relatively volatile stock.
Right.
So it's important to be comfortable with the potential ups and downs that come with investing in a company at this stage of development.
Excellent points.
Yeah.
I think that's a great note to end on.
I agree.
Understanding those 3 things, the upcoming PDUFA, date their financial performance,
Right.
and your own investment profile
Yes.
will help our listeners make a more informed decision
Absolutely.
about whether or not Checkpoint Therapeutics is the right investment for them.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of today's episode of Investing Talk Podcast.
It flew by.
I know we covered a lot of ground today, from FDA approvals to earnings reports to investment strategies.
It was a fascinating discussion.
It really was.
And I always enjoy breaking down these complex topics in a way that hopefully empowers our listeners to make smarter investment decisions.
Yeah, me too. And speaking of empowering our listeners,
Yes.
if you found today's episode helpful, we'd love for you to subscribe to Investing Talk Podcast.
Of course.
Share it with your friends and leave us a comment.
Yes, please.
We're always looking for new companies and investing trends to explore, so let us know what you'd like to hear about next.
We love hearing from our listeners.
Yes.
Until next time.
Happy investing.
Happy investing, everyone.